Good afternoon, everyone. Those who have joined us in person, as well as our online audience. It's pleasure to host today Nurgul uh, okay, Nurgul, who is a PhD candidate in Abai University, but who also lectures at Suleiman Demirel University. She is a psychologist and psychotherapist by background, and her research interests are in intergenerational trauma, particularly looking at the effects of Soviet regime on modern Kazakhstan, its legacy, and she's interested in looking at nomadic practices of parenting and what relevance those practices have for current day society in Kazakhstan. We are delighted to have you, Nurgul. As I mentioned, there's a lot of interest. We see new faces in the room and probably also online as well. So over to you, Nurgul, and we look forward to your talk.
Okay.
Your screen.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Nurgul. I'm psychotherapist. And first of all, I am a forensic psychologist on Istanbul Protocol. I was documenting of torture and other inhuman treatment consequences. So I think that I'm not classical researcher. I think that I'm a writer on topics about child nurture, Soviet upbringing, and PTSD consequences of Soviet era. Today we will talk about contemporary Soviet legacy. We heard a lot about this topic, but you know that I'm not professor, I'm not a researcher, I'm just a PhD candidate and psychotherapist and forensic psychologist. This means that we don't have researchers, I mean, in the psychological perspective, who has interest on this topic. What Soviet legacies we have? What contemporary Soviet legacies might be PTSD related legacies we have nowadays? And I had to start my own research on this topic because this topic is under-researched, and we have a lot we face with a lot of consequences, and we will try with you talk and discuss about these psychological consequences. First of all, contemporary Soviet legacy, how remnants of Soviet education are still we have. I think, where is, please, Briefsen, Briefsen. This year I wrote this book. unfinished Soviet famine, unfinished famine of Soviet children. And we think that we have four phenomena which had long-term consequences for Soviet main phenomena. First of all, we need to consider this phenomenon, the rejection of child individuality. From 1918, do you hear about Nadezhda Krupskaya?
Yes.
Yes, of course. She was author of this. How can I say? Maybe convention or framework. And we had documents which regulated how we need to reject child individuality. And Soviet educators had so extended plan of rejecting of child individuality. And individualistic and egoistic attitudes were their enemy. And it was considered as past of tendencies of bourgeois education that produce sheep. If I if I'm individualistic, I was a sheep. This words from official documents. And they needed to create some documents which will develop solely the aspiration to serve the interests of the Soviet state, not individuality, not personality. And in this, because of these plans, it wasn't matter having specialists, educators who следуют. Yes, who follows such values as individuality, respect of individuality, and etc. And our educators had to be teachers devoted to the only ideals of socialism, chosen without regard to their educational level. On какой page? In this book, I wrote which disciplines they had to research, they had to learn, and these disciplines were not about education. These disciplines were about building of Soviet state. Soviet state. Do we overcome those attitude or обращение, treatment? I think that we didn't, and we don't overcome this attitude. Nowadays we have some consequences, possible psychological consequences. And I can give you my own example. I was growing up in boarding school, and my parents were growing up in boarding school, and I need to have my own psychotherapeutic meetings to overcome my attitude to my children. Many years I thought that my children are not my children. They are schools, they are governments, they are Kazakhstan's, but they weren't my own children. And I thought that my children need to be raised by them, not by myself. And every parent and every educator in our country, I mean, nowadays, think that only educators, only teachers have to raise our children. And many parents don't feel their rights, their innate rights to raise their children, because they are Soviet children. We were raised by Soviet state, and we are continue this experience and practice. Here some possible consequences, such as operations, such as loss of critical thinking, conformity and uniformity, and educators focus on ideology. This point is important, because when we nowadays, when we do some strategies and some documents, we think that these strategies will be done by governments. Правильно же, да? Вот именно only our state, not parents, not society, only government is doing our strategies in educational field. Так, maybe you have some questions related to these points.
Anyone who would like to raise a question here?
Yeah.
So I think you said there were 4 points at the beginning.
First point. This.
On this, the first.
Yes. Mhm. And second phenomenon, Soviet phenomena, is we think it was forced child labor. Forced child labor. We had a unified concept of labor schools since 1918 and 19th. Author of this concept is Nadezhda Krupskaya. And child labor was a main way or main способ, method of upbringing. But we know that child labor is prohibited, not only nowadays, since 1950s. And according to this concept of labor schools, we had labor schools, we had labor prisons, and we had a lot of forms of labor наказание, punishment, maybe sentences. And regarding to this concept, every child had to be involved, and it was a main method of education, labor education. Only through labor education and labor upbringing, we expected creating of Soviet people who wants to work, who can work, and the main value of children must be labor. Then the Soviet education system incorporated forced labor activities, and nowadays we know, and in 1990s I was involved in such activities, and I know that in our southern, южная часть, southern Kazakhstan, nowadays we have such activities, such experiences. During September and October, they need to work. I mean, children. Махтатиру, я не знаю.
Harvesting cotton.
Yes. And they are continuing working during September and October. Yes, academic year. Psychological long-term consequences of this phenomenon. First of all, it is loss of personal identity. We had to be Soviet person who had to be love labor, and instead of playing, instead of my own realizing of my own desires, wantings, needings, I need to be work. Emotional suppression. Maybe I hated working when I was 5 years old, but I need to work. I had to work. Decreased autonomy and chronic stress and anxiety. We have some PTSD related consequences, and my research topic is about PTSD related consequences of this phenomenon.
Can I just ask,
Yes.
like, sort of devil's advocate, is it exactly the labor that's the problem? Because I guess in especially traditional societies like farming, children often work in the family. They have no choice but to work within the family. So is it that it was imposed by whatever ideologists and collectively, or is it
Only
children should not do any
ideologies.
labor?
Ideologies. It was ideologies. Ideology of Soviet state. And I think that it named not, it called not forced labor. This term is from human rights, and it called трудовые, ну вот labor schools, labor, как трудовые какие-то.
So psychologically, if I'm a child, I come home from my school, my parents say, we have a farm with cotton, now you must go out and pick the cotton this evening.
Yes.
Is that going to be psychologically harmed in the same way that this would be?
Так.
Он имеет в виду, что те дети, которые вот на первом ступени живут, они же тоже дома работают, родителям помогают. Это тоже так же влияет на них? Или это только Soviet system labor на них так повлияло?
I didn't understand your question. What? No. I mean not translation.
Conceptually.
Yes. What do you mean?
I suppose what I'm trying to say is, should children never be forced to do any work for these reasons by anybody, whether it's collective ideologists or whether it's their parents? Our parents, is it okay for parents to ask children to do the washing, work in the farm? That's just, you're saying psychologically what happened here is damaging. So I'm just interested in how far this argument extends.
I think that these phenomena are separate, because domestic какие burdens, choices are mine, and I feel these activities as mine and as own activities. When children have to work to state, they did it additional, and they had to work. If they if they как бы не хотели, да, это, ну как, это же часть образования. Часть образования.
It's part of the educational system.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, sure, no, I understand.
They, ну то есть үйде жұмыс істемесе олар, ну как бы жұмыс істемейді. Ана жақта жұмыс істемесе, получается, олар не дейді, жазаға тартылады да.
They have no choice to refuse.
But still,
Нет,
The difference is if you don't do your choices, it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
but if you don't do this stuff, you will be punished.
yeah, but my wife is Turkish and she had to do lots of labor in the home.
And
And her brothers were allowed to just do what they wanted. So that, you know, the end of the house.
they,
was like,
yes, they did it by fears,
no.
by oppression. And they had to be adult and to have responsibility as adult, and they did all of these activities by fears, and they had to be did.
There is a question here.
Okay.
So each time there are such
Oh.
similar practices, so that school students are, especially those who are studying in elementary grades, they are forced to clean their classrooms. So isn't that also considered a child labor?
Yes.
But
It
it
was
is
part of.
acceptable in Japan. While in the USSR, I think it is not acceptable.
Mhm.
Like people on social media, they tend to praise Japanese students for promoting collective good and social responsibility because they are forced, if you would say, to clean their classrooms. And isn't that also the same type of promoting social responsibility? But it is much more expensive, of course. Still, like, is child labor necessarily bad?
Your name, please. Your name, please.
Means now.
Daud. Nowadays, this country has a high көрсеткіштер, high indicators of suicide as consequences. Among children. Because all of forced activities как бы айрат, not deprivated. Да, жоғалтады өмір сүруге деген қызығушылығын. All of forced activities, түсіндіңіз ба? Yes, to live. Понятно, да? Вот.
Has this connection between forced labor?
Ну да.
Suicide and collective labor. Like there is a definite.
We mean not collective labor, we mean forced labor, mandatory labor. И mandatory labor, when I don't have choice. I need to, not I need, I have to do it. If I won't do it, I will punish by adults.
Вам на русском или приглашали или английском? Просто
I have,
if we say in Kazakh or Russian, then maybe someone can translate or I can translate it. So менің сұрағым мынандай. Қазіргі жастардың мына өзіміздің ескерімімен мына Совет Союз кезіндегі ненің қай несі бар? Именно сол не болған ба? Байланыс. Да, қандай байланыс бар? My question is like this like a Soviet heavy Soviet ideology is about the work labor of these children. Is it like directly connected or correlated with the suicide levels of the teenagers or young people in Kazakhstan? Today. Yes, today.
I think that we have correlations between not only suicide indicators. We call this phenomena as mental and behavioral health problems, and we have correlations. We have correlations between Soviet policies in Soviet policies of child treatment and contemporary state of mental health and behavioral health. If you remember, I said that I'm PhD candidate, and we have only one book on this topic, mine. Unfortunately, I did it during 7 years.
So
And
the parents of, I'm sorry to jump in. So the parents who were raised during the Soviet Union times,
they
their
are
ideology
continuing.
Negatively impacts these children that brings to suicidal risk.
Because all of these policies are internalized by Soviet children, and we are continuing these activities, and all of Kazakh children in this аудиторияда, you can agree with me. You are agree with me.
But how about, you're talking about Kazakhstan, but how about the other Central Asian republics that were?
I don't know. I'm a researcher in Kazakhstan.
No. I'm just saying, as for example, only the suicidal rates are high only in Kazakhstan youth is. But what about Uzbekistan? That was also Uzbekistan or Tajikistan or Turkmenistan or Kyrgyzstan. They were also under.
Can I suggest, probably she cannot really establish this empirical connection that audience is asking for. I would suggest we let her finish.
Yes.
Yeah, and then we can ask.
We have not a lot of time. Psychological long-term consequences, internalized oppressions, internalized conformity, decreased cognitive and creative development, trauma and PTSD-related phenomena, and difficulties in forming a relationship. Then third phenomena is boarding schools. I'm sorry. When I was 22 years old, I had a stroke. Insult, stroke, stroke. And I can write in English, but I'm speaking in English. I have some problems as consequences of my illnesses, and кей сөздерді ұмытып қаламын да. Yes. And a third phenomena is Soviet deprivations in boarding schools. You know that we overcome, I think not overcome, two famines in 1920s and 30s. We lost more than 70% of our population. We overcome Second World War, and in 1950s, we had absence or deficits of workers, and we, according to Khrushchev's concept, our children had to work, and their parents also had to work. And 1955 and 56, Nikita Khrushchev raised the issue of creating a network of boarding schools. I said that I was raised in a boarding school, and a lot of us were raised in a boarding school. It is our contemporary culture to give our children to boarding schools, and these boarding schools created Soviet people, or builder of the new society. I was growing up when I was 12 years old, but my mother started to live in boarding schools when she was 6 years old. And I think that the main consequences of boarding schools is the deprivations, psycho-emotional deprivations, physical deprivations, and all of kinds of deprivations. What consequences we have? Parental detachment, state control over value formation. Maybe we have students from Kazakh Turk. Kazakh Turk or
What is that?
high schools or other kinds of boarding schools, and we know that some values of these schools are more important than our parental values. And most importantly, today we have parents who believe that upbringing, raising, and foundations of human development are the prerogative of schools and other educational systems, not their personal responsibility. Maybe you have questions?
I can affirm that it is true because I worked in secondary school for 15 years.
I'm not hearing you.
I can affirm that this is true because I worked in secondary school education for 15 years. And if you call, let's say, a parent and ask them to help you to issues of the children, they would usually start arguing with you that actually that the children spend more time at school than they spend time at home with them. So it's our responsibility that we have created that issue. For example, I was calling a parent about plagiarism, and then parents start arguing that we actually taught how to plagiarize. So,
From second это не восставший. Second primary school to universities.
yeah, true. And for example, a lot of the parents try to, pay to private schools, whereas their children could spend time from, let's say, 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. So they are ready to pay more if the children could stay longer in school, so that they could work or they could provide, they could earn money for the school to pay the school.
Yes.
So
We are internalized this
Yeah.
phenomena.
true, yeah.
And unfortunately, we had boarding schools and we had another educational organization as kindergartens, Soviet kindergartens. And our parents were raised by kindergartens. They had to be there from 8-9 hours a week to 5 days a week. Since 6 hafta кезінен бастап.
6 weeks. 8 weeks old.
Yes, they need to be raised by government since 8 weeks old. And boarding schools only continuation of this big policy of creating and building of Soviet people.
Can I ask one question?
Okay.
What kind of, who went to boarding school? Was it a middle class thing or upper or lower or everybody?
From primary.
What kind of social
Okay.
status did the family have, who decided to send the kids to boarding school?
It depends on ауылдардан. Locations, yes, locations. If we was not industry, agricultural state or a country, and a lot of местности, not locations.
Areas.
Maybe areas. A lot of areas don't have schools. And my mother lived in Aul, and this Aul doesn't have school. And she had to go to районный. Yes.
Thank you.
Child labor exploitations. Here we have some our results of our research, and more than 93% of respondents were involved in labor by the age of 13. Так, ну, в принципе, здесь ничего не интересно. Так, and past phenomena of past forced Soviet phenomena or is strict regime of Soviet upbringing. Maybe some of us faced. Do you know about this phenomenon? Something maybe you.
You mean
Yes, you may share your experiences, no? Okay.
So, yeah, I was going to add to that previous slide, and it seems another very important point is about like violence and abuse as being a consequence of boarding schools. Whether, I don't know, it's not just the Soviet Union, boarding schools in, for example, my country are violent, abusive places, especially historically.
Soviet boarding school has own peculiarities.
Yeah.
Peculiarities. In other countries, parents decide a question of giving their children to boarding schools. In the Soviet era, we didn't have choice. We had to give our children because of sentences. You know about Brodsky. Did you hear? Joseph Brodsky. If you wanted, if you in our country, entrepreneurship was restricted. In our country, everyone had to work to state. We didn't have any choices where we can work and when we can work. And if and because of forced labor of adults, and because of criminal liability, уголовная ответственность. Yes, we were involved to labor, and we need to give our children because of absence of schools, forced labor, and because of needings of state. It wasn't my own parental choice.
Can I request to conclude? We are only 12 minutes
Oh,
away, so maybe
yes.
people have a couple of questions and they can ask.
Okay. Так. And we know about strict regime of Soviet upbringing, and we give some examples. When Soviet children байланыстырды. Түрме сияқты қараған. Yes, мектеп және түрме екеуін бірдей қараған да.
Schools and prisons.
Қаттырақ. Чтобы все.
Who were associated with like the jail?
Prison. All of our nowadays adults, our Soviet children. Ну, в принципе, that's all. And if you have some questions, I'm ready to answer.
My name is Jati. 5 years I am there.
I'm the right person from the user side. And, I witnessed the things you explained here. And what is true, it is labor. We were involved in the laboring. And now I can say that I wasn't on the fresh up.
Oppressed?
Yeah, oppressed at all. And now I'm sitting and remember it is a wonderful time from my childhood. And I live in Shymkent Oblast. You were discussing. I went from city Shymkent 5 hours away to the side to pick cottons, and we stayed for the one term for 2 months, September, October, and it was wonderful time. And we lived with our classmates, no lessons, and that's how you remember it. Yeah.
Yes, of course. It's your memory. But we,
It's important, you know?
yes,
Things don't have objective reality, it's how we perceive it, which is important to us.
and we have just some consequences. You had wonderful time, wonderful time. It's okay, but we have some consequences of this phenomena. And these consequences is, например, қазақша айтсам болады ғой да сізге, кез келген нәрсеге, вот, например, еңбекке тарту арқылы да, кез келген нәрсеге біз burden ретінде қараймыз. Бір мынандай қазіргі балаларда қызығушылық жоқ өзінің. Барлық нәрсеге біз burden труд ретінде қараймыз, да? И это уже өмірмен байланысын өскен. Это уже psychological perspective. If you can translate, please.
Yeah. There's a question from Jadra.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted maybe kind of reaffirm that you were talking about forced labor. So just my family experience. So our family was among the rich families, and it was during the
Executed, maybe.
Yeah, they were oppressed, and my grandfather, he spent his childhood in this forced labor, actually. So I think that has this kind of effects on the family. But it's very difficult to have like correlation, as you are asking, because it's about experiences and past experiences, and you cannot have direct effect on the suicide rate, on these things.
Yes, we have, just a moment, we have term, yes, intergenerational trauma, transgenerational trauma, or historical trauma and cultural trauma. And I'm here because of these phenomena, because how these historical traumas, cultural traumas, or intergenerational ways of trauma creating affected to our educational system. This question is under-researched, and I invite you to research this topic. We have a lot of historical traumas, and we have consequences, and we don't have contemporary отдельные, separate forms of problems. We have some consequences of historical traumas. And how we change it, how these historical traumas affected to contemporary situation. These topics are under-researched. Yes, your question?
There's a paradox here, because what I see is
the legacy of schools being seen as prisons, kind of, or akin to prisons. Yet the parents, like what you were saying, are sending their children to schools in the hopes of, or the expectations that the schools are going to raise them. And it's hard to kind of conceptualize parents sending their children to something that has such a dark legacy of being like a prison. Maybe they themselves have had maybe perhaps nice memories, but maybe not so nice given that there was forced labor and quite difficult conditions. So I don't know, what do you have any kind of idea about why parents continue to send their children and rely on schools to raise them?
Because it's the psychological mechanism to internalize some phenomena, external phenomena, as mine, and we need sometimes we need to терапевтировать. Вот, например, айтып жатыр ғой, мысалы үшін wonderful time деп та, бірақ это мен үшін жақсы өмір болуы мүмкін, бірақ ол менің балаларымның құндылықтарына сәйкес келмейді да. Тогда ол травмаға алып келеді. То есть получается, мен не көрдім, соны ары қарай жалғастырамын. Maybe you translate, yes.
Whatever we experience in our childhood and our life, we internalize it as a norm, and then we do the same to our children. Of course, those experiences that we didn't like as children, we try not to copy in our, relationship with our children. But a lot of the other experiences that were norm back then, which are now can be described as horrific, we still continue because it's the norm for us.
And
because we haven't seen other different models.
And by unconsciousness. I can do it by unconsciousness.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question about methods? Yeah, you're drawing a lot on your autobiography, yeah? And I wonder whether your entire conclusions are coming from looking inwards, or you also consulted, maybe collected data like from people like Julia, who are still, who can share first-hand experiences, or maybe archives, other people reporting on education system at the time, so that you can get a broad understanding of how people felt in and around the education system at that time.
Oh, I think that we need to start to research this area.
Okay.
Okay, and we need to share with our results. First of all, we can work with consequences, contemporary consequences, but if we don't know about reasons of contemporary consequences, we cannot change our situation. Yeah, и тогда получается, ну вот, қазір соған айтып келе жатырмын, да, вот, and we used just our psychological methods, qualitative, quantitative methods, phenomenological, psychotherapy, and наблюдение, observation, since так, 2015-тен қанша жыл болды? То есть 9 жыл мен observation жасадым. Yes. Adults who who was raised in Soviet era, and their descendants.
I mean, one thing is, as Jerry mentioned, many schools, not only Soviet schools or Kazakh schools, many schools kind of display some of the very important things that you mentioned, and many Western governments are nanny states, yeah? They have taken that power away from parents and what parents can do to children and cannot. So this is quite a bigger debate about what the role of school is and what the role of parents is in the education of children. But thank you so much for sharing these insights, and it's identifying a huge research gap that potentially students can fill using different methodologies, connecting the present to the past, and how we came about here in the present. I mean, it can be a trauma, as you mentioned. I've never been in most situations you explained, but growing up in a rural farm, when I became school age, my father sent me to a city to his mother, and although I was in a loving care of my grandmother, that time I still remember with huge pain. Every night I would go sleeping on my grandma's arm, but imagining this is not my grandma's arm, this is my mom's arm. And next morning I wake up and look at the roof, and I don't see the wooden panels in the roof, and it's a cemented roof, and my heart sinks. So, education comes at huge sacrifices, huge philosophical points you mentioned, but I think as a researcher, it would be good to collect a broader perspective and use different methodologies to get to the point, because certainly, whether through internalization or whatever, it might have been a source of, this is how people remember school as a source of joy. I remember my schooling experience as a huge source of joy, and probably many of you too, yeah? So thank you very much, Gulnur. It was a joy to have you here. You drew a lot of crowd.
Thanks a lot for your attention. Yes, of course.
I've never seen your book before, but I read the book. Yes, sir. And I think I want to advertise it to everyone, every Kazakh woman, every Kazakh man, to find a new appreciation for our traditions. So a lot of the times, those of us who had experienced violence, as we got due to our Kazakh culture, but this book really gives you different perspectives into our traditions and how we could have been raised if we understood our culture better. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much and for your attention.
Thank you very much, all of you, for asking very good questions, keeping it alive.
Yes.
If there is a